begin this half hour with a developing story out of Westchester County. Police in North Salem investigating a suspicious death.
They're the murders which left everlasting fear throughout the county.
To paint a picture of how diverse Westchester is, not just in its people, but in its crimes.
They're some of the most heinous crimes, filled with love, mystery, and brutality.
That was one of the most horrible cases to me.
From the unthinkable murders committed by the real-life Hannibal Lecter to the gruesome deaths of each of these victims you see here, they all have a true commonality. They happened right here in Westchester County.
Terrible, terrible things can happen here. Don't cling too tenaciously to these illusions, because violence and horror and trauma can find you wherever you are.
Westchester Magazine senior editor Nick Brandy and assistant editor Gina Valentino are diving deep into the most gruesome and unsolved murders in Westchester with their series Twisted Crimes, which you can find inside the pages of the October issue of Westchester Magazine.
Some of them were absolutely horrific, and some of them were a bit more toned down. Some of them were really lurid. Some of them were extremely interesting.
One of the most horrific, the murders committed by this man, Albert Fish. The unassuming Harrison native was slender and trustworthy, but a vicious and sadistic killer, gratified by the torture of children. Fish admitted to killing over 100 children, and he would dismember his victims and then eat them.
He was a fanatic on hurting himself. He inserted needles into his own body. When he was sentenced to death at the electric chair, he was rumored to have said, "This is the only thrill that I have not tried."
The house you see right here is where investigators say Albert Fish committed one of his most high-profile crimes, the brutal murder of 10-year-old Grace Budd. It was the murder that would eventually lead to the capture of Albert Fish, and despite it happening 90 years ago, it's still a crime that has literally snatched away the innocence of this affluent Westchester County village.
An elderly woman is found dead at her northern Westchester home.
And now officials say Lois Colley, the wife of a prominent businessman, was killed.
When Lois Colley was bludgeoned to death at her sprawling 300-acre windswept farm in North Salem, the 83-year-old and her husband Eugene were county socialites who owned 100 McDonald's franchises. Investigators eventually charging Victor Gomez with the brutal murder.
It was said that he had an argument with one of her family members, so he approached her. They found her in the laundry room, bludgeoned to death.
And next door to North Salem is the town of Lewisboro, where 38 years prior, there was the frightening home invasion which rocked this Westchester community. The vicious murders of Bonnie Minter and Sheila Watson made headlines. Both were raped and shot multiple times while their children watched and listened in horror. These three men charged in the brutal murders, two are serving life sentences, one of them dying in prison.
I'm troubled by the image of a little boy in the aftermath of witnessing his mother's death and the brutality of it. He had like a .25 caliber weapon.
And for Nick Brandy, there's a personal touch to the murder investigation at the Sawmill Motel. This video of John Weaver, a newlywed full of life and adored by all, enjoying himself on Lake George with his best friend Nick Brandy and others. Months later, Weaver would be murdered at the Sawmill River Motel, where he worked as a night manager, in cold blood. Nick Brandy making the discovery of his best friend.
It's an unsolved murder. It's very unusual for this area, and it is an ongoing source of tremendous frustration.
Frustration and fear is what gives unique perspectives about these horrendous crimes, shattering the illusion of the sanctity of Westchester County, a county which encompasses both beauty and bloodshed. Raimundi, Files 1 News.